I'm Jennifer Merin. I'll be your moderator for this evening's Q&A. Again, please applaud. Mention to her that, this is her first feature, and I am in awe. I have to say, I think it's an accomplishment that's really quite extraordinary. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
And I'm taking off my mask. This water. Ha! Relief. Let me kick this off and then we'll open it up to the audience. I understand that there are a number of filmmakers or people who are connected with film here, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions or comments that you'd like to make. Just to start off, this is a co-production, as I understand it, between Sweden and Costa Rica. The cultures are very different, and yet they have in common, I think, a preoccupation with nature, and also with how humans relate to nature. Can you comment about that as a central theme for the film?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. Regarding nature, I grew up in Costa Rica. I was born in Sweden, but grew up in Costa Rica, but I grew up in the city, so even if there's like trees everywhere, just being completely surrounded by just nature didn't happen that much for me growing up. And then when coming to Sweden, where public transportation is so accessible and Swedes only get a certain amount of the year with light, and then when they do get that light, they really go out to nature a lot. So I kind of rediscovered my relationship to nature when I moved to Sweden when I was 18. And then in going back to Costa Rica and imagining this film, when writing it, I came back with kind of new eyes, kind of rediscovered Costa Rica again as an adult.
Have you shown the film both in Costa Rica and in Sweden? Is there a different response to it in each country?
Well, Costa Rica gets the humor a lot more because they really understand everything, all the little films. But they were Costa Rica was very proud to see their own country portrayed so intimately, and to portray, we have some indigenous communities come and watch, and that they could relate in Clara's way of relating to nature was very special to hear. And then in Sweden, it's more like opening the window into another kind of nature, very different than Sweden. So it's a bit different, but they connected to the
You've elected to use non-actors, and this film is peopled by people that we feel comfortable with. I felt very comfortable with everyone who was in that film. I never challenged their authenticity. How did you find them, and how did you direct them? This is a huge accomplishment.
In Spanish, we call them natural actors, which I think is very beautiful because it's not negating something. I didn't choose to work with natural actors. It was more that we opened an invitation for people that hadn't acted before to come and do the casting, and it just turned out that some of these people were fitting the characters better than what we were imagining. And then they didn't read the script, but I detailedly told them the whole story, taking a lot of focus in like the sensitive scenes, the sex scenes, the scenes that were political. Like, for example, Clara's mother is very religious in real life, so it was important that she understood this is what the movie is going to be saying, and she was okay with that. So we rehearsed for 3 weeks, mostly family dynamics, a lot with energy, animality. I'm a mime actress. My bachelor's in miming. It's a real degree. And so I approach acting a lot from like the body. So a lot of playing and a lot of working with them to feel safe on set and to feel safe to use their real emotions and be vulnerable and have the tools to, open, be vulnerable, but also closing the door again and be okay on set, which is a very stressful situation. So we did that before, and then they read the script right before we were going to shoot, just so they could understand how it all fit together. And then during rehearsals, I could take a little bit from their work and also put it into the script, and then they would feel more like they were already part of the making of it.
how many takes did you do with each scene? I mean, because they're not trained particularly. How did you manage to get what you needed with each scene?
We didn't take that many shots. I think the most shots we took is the masturbation scene with the fireflies. And trying to follow this invisible, spoiler alert, it's VFX. Invisible firefly. I think that was like 15. But other than that, it was not normal amount of takes, and we had rehearsed how a set would be somehow. And the person who is most in front of the camera is Wendy, the woman who plays Clara, and she's a dancer, and she's so used to choreography. And the way she describes the character, when people ask her how is it to go from dance to acting as Clara, she's like, oh, but Clara is dancing all the time. It's just that it's a very internal dance. So it's very choreographed. So for example, the firefly scene, like every movement, and we would approach it in a very choreographical way. Like, oh, can you try with the legs outstretched? How does that feel? Like, it was, yeah.
No, there's a lot that's happening non-verbally in this film, which is, the communication is extraordinary, really. And I think that everybody feels it because of that. How did you find the character of Clara? I mean, where does she come from in your psyche?
I think that the thematic of the movie comes a lot from memories of growing up in Latin America in a religious community, not fanatic, but just a community that was still reproducing, that was very loving, but still reproducing all these norms of how women should be, even within houses where there were no men in. So it was basically like a matriarchal houses that were still reproducing patriarchy. But Spark of Clara actually came from an application to a film school where they gave us different stills and like create a story from here. So that's where the character per se comes from, and the fact that her back is the way it is, and the fact that she looks at the world in a very honest way and with no shame for her own desires, which I always felt growing up. I was missing a space to talk about desires. There was always a space to talk about sexuality in school, like from a biological point of view, but never desire. And I remember looking at sex scenes and feeling things and feeling awkward about it, and my body is doing something I'm not agreeing with. While for men, that was more common to talk about. So yeah, we were just wanting to, me and my co-writer Monica Milarias, to create this character that had no shame for her body and her desires. And the way she was created, it was really a collaboration with me and Wendy. It felt like taking her out of the ground in a way, like the way she was gonna be, the way she was gonna move. The first time we met with Wendy in the casting, I always tried to act with the actors. I just say hello, I'm Nathalie, we're gonna be wolves, so you can be there, I'll be here. And we just basically started as 100% wolves, just growling, smelling each other, howling a bit. And then she's a dancer, so she was fine with this. With the other actors that work with computers daily or something like that, we had another approach. Too scary. And then slowly we started to put in percentages of humans. So now you're 80% wolf, 20% human, and upping it up until I was 100% human, and she always remained with 10% of wolf, depending on what was happening. And that's the part of her that can't say no if she doesn't like something, the part of her that's intuitive, that can listen to nature, that doesn't see a difference between herself and nature in a way.
I'm fascinated by the way you used animals, Yuka and Ophir. Ophir, I don't think I've seen a beetle acting before. I certainly don't know how you managed to direct a beetle. And I think the last time a beetle featured as a character in anything was when, in Christopher Robin, I had a little beetle in Alexander, and beetle was his name, but I called him Alexander, and he answered his name. And when Ophir flies off into nature, how did you capture all of that?
A lot of patience. The Beatles did several. We had doubles. Well, we talked to, I blacked out on the name, the insect specialist. Thank you. And figured out what they like to eat and all that. And they lived with me in my room in a terrarium, and they were very happy. They lived 5 weeks with us, and normally they would leave.
With a union?
3. So it was a lot in my head. It's like, well, ladybugs always like go up and fly. Of course it's gonna work. It was not that easy. But so it normally just went up and just flew down. They're so heavy. But we would just find them around the forest, and anyone in the crew who found one got a beer. No, it's a mix of VFX in small parts, but also they had different rhythms depending on where the life stage they were. So we would use the more awake ones, the more sleepy ones, and it's very cold there. And when it's very cold, I'm ruining the magic now, by the way. I did revive it. When it's very cold, they go more still. So then when you blow on them, they come back.
Wow. I wanted to mention your use of the elements here. They all figure in just thematically, and I want to know what this means, because I've heard magical realism, the term magical realism used in regard to the film. You have fire, you have water, you have earth, and you have air flying off. Why is it important to have all of those elements as almost as characters in the film?
I know they're so inherent to like the place. I never thought of like why, but it was very present in the script. Even like not only the elements that we see, but also like this part feels more like water because it's very So also like the feel of the elements, and also inside Wendy, the same way we work with the wall, we work with the elements inside of her. So now she's really compact earth, or now the fire inside is so much, but her body is encapsulating it, so she can't move. Like we're really working with the internal images of elements a lot. So they were present, I think, everywhere. In our shoes, everywhere, all over the set and inside of us somehow.
I think we should open this up to the audience. Has anyone a question or a comment for Wendy? For Wendy, sorry. For Nathalie. I see you, there's a close relationship there, I'm sure. Come on, yes, way in the back, please.
No, I was in...
I can't hear you. Can you come down so that we can...
It's a short question. I was in Costa Rica for the first time 1 month ago. I was in Guanacaste.
You was in Costa Rica a month ago?
I was wondering in which region of the country you shoot and when did you do it?
Yes, when and where. It's shot in the middle of Costa Rica in the area, in the higher parts. We scouted the whole country basically of the higher parts. There's a lot of microclimates that we wanted a bit colder feeling. And we finished the shoot, it was 7 weeks, and we finished the shoot the week when the pandemic hit Costa Rica. It was very but we were kind of isolated, so we managed, and then we did all the posts in the pandemic in Belgium. It's also a Belgian co-production.
Did you run into any particular technical difficulties because of the isolation of the location?
No, not because of that, because it looks very isolated, but there is a community pretty close by. There's just so many spaces that look like deep forest. This particular place, the family that had it has like an agreement with the government where they basically get paid for oxygen. So it's very old wood, so we have to be very careful. If it's a certain thickness, we cannot like touch it. Like it's nature is very respected here, which felt very good for the moment.
Audience, questions, comments? Yes, back there, I see.
Is there more than one connection to Sleeping Beauty in the movie?
There's more than one connection to Sleeping Beauty. Yes, but it's kind of up to.
I didn't hear the question.
The question is there more than one connection to Sleeping Beauty in the I think there's several different tales that we wanted to get inspiration from, and that's definitely one of them. Yeah, I grew up like a lot of people watching Disney princess movies and having a love for them at the same time that they were, also imposing norms in a different way than the religious norms were, but also norms. So yeah, just.
Yes, please.
Hello. I know it's such an adventure going into making your first feature, and it sounds like you've worked with the actors in such an organic way. And I know so many things can come up when making your first feature. So I'm just curious, in terms of what we see on the screen, how much of that was from the script that the two of you wrote together? How much came up organically on set, and how much of it did you find in the edit? Like, sort of, where is the marriage of those things in this final version here?
I think it's very close to the script in the tone. Some scenes had to change position to express better what we actually intended because they didn't come out exactly the way we wanted, but maybe the weather was different or we were feeling different. There wasn't that much improvisation on set except for the camera was very planned. We had the fortune of having the set, it was just a white house, and then while they were redoing the whole thing, we could be there and really plan for the place. Except for some scenes where we would write, okay, here, intuitive camera. Then we would kind of feel it more. But other than that, it wasn't that improvised. I'm not very particular about words because they're not the driving force of the piece. So they could like move around certain words or change. That wasn't that important for me. But other than that, it was kind of very planned. I didn't realize how planned until one of the actors was doing a Q&A and he was, it was very precise. I didn't know it was that precise, but yeah. And then in the editing, what was interesting is that, because there's the magical realism that is in the story, that the characters or Clara is aware of, but then there's the feeling of magical realism that we might get as an audience that the characters don't know about. And some of that was born in the edit and in some slight improvisations on set. For example, when she's under the water and it goes into the river with the dress, that wasn't written. That was like, remember Ophelia when she's like, we can take some pictures now that we're here. And like, wait, why don't we? And I was so like unsure because it was the time, what if it doesn't work? And actually one of the producers that's sitting back there was like, because I was like, I have to do it with the dress under or without, just regular. He said, well, I'd rather the movie fails because we took a risk than because it's boring. I was like, well, let's do it. So it was very collaborative also with all the people that were there and could give a lot of like input. So a lot of the magical realism that has to do more with the fact of that the form is poetry and not the content was born out of the edit or like the collaboration. Or like, choosing to put music in a more prominent place or stuff like that.
We had a question, I think there was, yes, please.
Just on the topic of collaboration and music, the music is really rhythmic and so soothing the whole time. And I just want to know, did you know that in the writing process, that that's the kind of music you wanted? Did that evolve as you shot and, as you edited? And how much of that did you know ahead of time? Because it really is so beautiful, it's so fitting.
Thank you, Ruben. I didn't know when I was writing it was going to be this. I was writing to feel good. Music. Ruben knows. She was busy doing Joker. But I was fortunate enough to work with Ruben, who has done a lot of orchestra music. And what was so particular about him is that in soundtracks, I could almost always guess how it's gonna go right before it happens. But with him, I just had no idea how the piece was gonna go. That was so special. And we worked, I didn't want to give him any references of sounds. It was just images and descriptions of images. Like here, it would be nice if he sounded something like light being refracted. And then he could like what he thought that was. And then he asked me for stills. He said, choose 20 stills, and then I gave him that, and then he's just, I don't know, he made like 40, I don't know how, he worked so fast. He made like 40 pieces, like, okay, guess which ones of these go with these images. And sometimes it was like completely different images, but then a lot of the things started to grow from there, and what he originally made for water now is fire, and then we start to mold from there. So no, I didn't know before, but he did do some tests before when I was shooting, and we did compose the prayer songs. He composed them, and me and my mom made the lyrics.
I think, yes, we have time for, I think, one more question.
Two more questions.
Two more questions. Yes, please, sir.
Hi, Nathalie. I think it was a wonderful film, extraordinarily strong, and particularly when she finally screams at her mother at the party. It's a catharsis that is well achieved and well earned. I have actually two questions. Usually when you make your first film, you're advised not to use animals. But here you have to work with a horse, and it works so very well. So I want to know how you handle the horse. And then another question is the ending. Sometimes it's hard when you do a character-driven story like this, and you do a portrait so close, to know how it's going to end. And for me, the ending worked very, very well. But I want to know, how did you come to it? When was the decision made?
Okay, so about the horse,
Yes.
her name is Tormenta, which means storm in Spanish. She's so pretty, so big, and when she came to set, she was like, she's like a pretty expensive horse. The most valuable being on set was Tormenta. And she was training with Wendy like a month before. Wendy decided to never ride her. They would meet like on an equal level, being friends, and developed a very special connection. Wendy was the only one that was allowed to come and like be with her and feed her. No one else in the team, so that they could develop that bond. And of course, we had two trainers there all the time, because she's not dangerous per se, but if she gets scared, and she's like a 600 kilo, this doesn't mean anything in the US, but very heavy creature. And then what was very nice, we had to be very like quiet and be very mindful, because even though she's so big in her head, she's at the bottom of the food chain, so she's very scared. But she got used to us, and in the end, what was very nice is that she had kind of like relaxed around us, and she wasn't like this pompous lady anymore. She was just like very chill. So she had another kind of transformation, which was very nice. And now she's pregnant. I just got a text the other day. A little storm. And about the ending was there from the very, very, very first draft. And since that was there, then the element of magical realism had to be there too, to lead up to it. So even in the moments where we felt like, oh, the element is too much, we try to keep all the elements of magical realism and try to make them fit somehow, make everything work around that and the ending, which we wanted to also keep somewhat open, to give space to the audience with their own luggage and lives to read into. So yeah, there's different. I have different readings myself, and then I've discovered new ones when screening it, which is super cool.
I'm going to close this out with one last question that I'm going to ask. This is a film that's very feminist. You're a woman director. There's great concern about giving women directors opportunities in Hollywood and around the world. I wonder what your ambitions are, what you plan next.
So next, I'm writing my second feature then. It's called The Wolf Will Tear Your Immaculate Hens. And it's a tropical gothic set in colonial Latin America. I can't get more detail than that because it'll get too complicated to explain. But it's also going to be a mix of languages, a production. It's bigger than CLARA. It still has the magical realism element. It handles the themes of also how patriarchy is kind of inherited and in our bodies, even as women, and how are we gonna stop reproducing it if that's the education that we get. So a little bit about how do we do that in one lifetime, which is impossible except for in cinema. Otherwise you need several generations for that. So that's what we're doing. It's a bit more uncanny and eerie than CLARA. And then hopefully I'm looking to other things to direct that maybe I don't write myself. I'm doing my first episode of TV next year, which is very exciting.